What is up, everybody? And welcome back to the Save Dish podcast, where we talk about being young, Christian, and imperfect. Although that young part is starting to feel less and less applicable to me. Maybe Caitlin can be the young one, and I'll be middle aged or something. I don't know. Uh,
Old. Old is the term you're looking for.
I'm not old. I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. But again, I am your co-host Keith.
Oh, and I'm Caitlin. My bad, y'all. This new setup is different.
Yes, and as you may notice, we are not in the same room. I'm traveling this week, so we're doing it a bit 2020 COVID style. But we did want to make sure that we gave you all another great episode, we hope. And you also may notice there's another guest with us here. We have our amazing pastor, Pastor Nutall, who you may remember from previous episodes of Saved Ish. But he is here with us today as we want to talk about kind of the big story, the thing that's on most people's mind, and of course that is the election. We now know, I guess, most of the results. We know that Donald Trump is now president elect. We know who will likely control the Senate. House still up in the air, may be decided by the time you hear this, but we felt that just kind of based on a lot of what we're seeing um, from our church family as well as from other people that we know, that this was something that was worth talking about as soon as possible. But also we wanted to make sure we had someone who was probably a bit more equipped to help us to navigate all of the feelings, all of the reactions, all the emotions. And that is why we have Pastor Nuttall here with us. Pass, anything you want to say before we kind of jump into everything?
I'm just happy to be on the Safest podcast, and I don't know exactly how I fit in or where I fit in terms of that opening conversation about the young and the old. I'm not on either spectrum. I'll just say that, and then we can just go ahead and go with that.
Yeah, nobody's old. I think I'm just less young than I was when we started this thing. And then having two kids, I think adds like 10 years to how old you feel. So I'm somewhere in
In
the
the
middle
middle
of
with
it
me,
all.
in the middle with me. You're in the middle with
Yeah,
me.
yeah, there we go. There we go. But yeah, man, obviously we know the results. For many, at least in my kind of immediate circles, it was a disappointing one. But also for some, it was exactly what they were hoping for. I know a lot of people, especially investors, are very happy this week. I think Bitcoin hit 90,000 today, and that is something that I don't know that I ever saw coming. And so there's a spectrum. I don't want to act like everybody feels the same way about this, but I think it's safe to say that most people, specifically in the Black church, are a bit frustrated and disappointed. And so, I guess my first question to you, Pass, is, as a leader, as a shepherd of the flock, how do you process dealing with times like this, and what is your approach to really kind of providing support that people need?
Yeah, well, I think with regard to this particular outcome, the two words that come to mind for me are disappointed and betrayed.
Mm,
Um, Disappointed um, in the outcome, yes, but more than just the outcome, disappointed in the environment that has been created as a result of even the consideration of a Donald Trump presidency.
mhm,
When we look back at 2016, okay, perhaps you didn't take what it is that was said seriously. Perhaps it was political rhetoric for you. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But in 2024, you don't have that same question about what it is to expect because we've had the Charlottesville massacre. We've had babies in cages. We've had the debacle of COVID. We've had a conspired and inspired insurrection. We've had 30 plus felony convictions. And here we find ourselves with 8 out of 10 white evangelical Christians who voted for Donald Trump. I'm not sure how that can be explained or justified just on the face of it, but also betrayed because, as I said on Sunday when in the sermon, my sister and I were taught values that are the same. And the most important thing that I was taught by my parents was to take care of my sister. And she was going to take care of her brother. And in the context of the faith, we have those who call us sister and brother
Hmm.
who took care of their interest and prioritized their interest over their values. That feels like betrayal to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think interest over values and principles is something that I also felt like deeply, even kind of leading up to this thing. I would talk to some of my people I consider friends and close family members even who may have been on the other side of the fence, and they would present their case for why they were voting a certain way. And to your point, there were always just this like, but at our core, like there are these principles, there are these things that I feel like our entire belief system is built upon. And the other candidate, not that Kamala was perfect, but the other candidate just I felt like represented so much of the antithesis of those things. Honesty, um, you know, looking out for those who can't look out for themselves, and respecting women, which is one that I got two sisters as well, and I just anybody who doesn't respect women or doesn't respect the working individual, somebody who's actually just trying to, put in their work and, receive a fair shake for that effort. It really bothers me. And I can't look beyond that. And I can't think about just what may be best for my portfolio or for, personal gain. And so I struggle with that as well. Now, one thing obviously we cannot do is neglect to hear from a Black woman. Caitlin, I can't imagine, what this has been for you, but I also want to make sure that I thank you and I thank all Black women for showing up as you always have, and really just doing the dang thing because consistently that's been the story. But I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, what a day to be a Black woman. Every day is a great day to be a Black woman, but it was interesting to be Black and a woman on the day of the election. But before I touch on that aspect of it, I think one thing that is kind of sticking out to me between what you and Pastor said is like the principle. So like I'm a real like principles person, and like a situation may not be that big of a deal, but if the principle behind it is detrimental or like wrong, then I tend to focus on that. And so I think I just like to say for the people out there who are like, who somebody might be saying, oh, well, we've lost the election to him before, or we've lost the election before, or whatever side you may be on. Sometimes, like we've been saying in this episode, the principle of what this win for Donald Trump stands for is way bigger than him actually winning the election. Okay, cool. A Republican won. It's happened before. It'll probably happen again. But it's the principle of the fact that enough people in this country had that mindset to say, we want him again, despite knowing what he is about to bring to the table, or at least going to try. Which brings me into my point about being a Black woman in America. Like seeing the type of person that he portrays himself to be, because I don't know him personally, or just like everything that he stood for in his platform. It is very daunting as a young woman. I am in medical school and I'll be going to residency or applying for residency in 2.5 years. And I would have loved to have gone back to the South for residency because I'm originally from Louisiana. But unfortunately, because of healthcare and just having the rights to my own body, I don't know if that will be a feasible thing for me. So I guess to just kind of backtrack to make it make sense, to be kind of transparent. I had a tumor that they found this past May, and I had surgery to get the tumor removed. But under insurance and paperwork or whatever, the procedure is considered an abortive like surgery. And so if I was in any other state, as far as like back home in Louisiana or Mississippi, Alabama, I would have ran into a lot of walls trying to get the procedure done. And if I didn't have the mass removed, then that would have caused a whole bunch of other complications down the line. So it's scary because it's like the results directly affect me. Like I don't have to, hear a friend talk about it or listen to an auntie. Like this is something that's going to affect my life, and so it brings a different side of empathy towards the outcome that may, come to life. Hopefully not, but you never know. But I know that was really long winded. I'm
Oh,
gonna pass it back to y'all.
no, I appreciate you sharing that. And to your point, like making it real. I think there are so many anecdotes and stories that people hear, and some people just frankly aren't close enough to it.
Mhm.
And I think it reminds me of COVID. I have older family members or family members who have comorbidities, and so for me, it just was a bit different. And so for you to share that story, it just makes it very real. Like you said, in 2.5 years, your life was probably going to look one way moving back down south, and now
Mhm.
everything's changed. And that may mean time away from your family. That may mean just a lot of things that have to be altered due to someone who will likely never be affected by this, deciding that it's something that he knows better than you. And so thank you
Mhm.
for sharing that. I know that that is, a personal story, but I think it's important to add color to these things. Moving back to past, you mentioned something earlier, specifically that that white evangelical boat. Um, and I'm curious how, as a man of God, as a Christian, as a minister, who I'm sure has relationships, with ministers who may be on the other side of the aisle. I see a lot of people on social media talking about cutting off their family, cutting off friends because of this thing. And like I said, I do have friends and family who are on this other side of the aisle. So I'm curious how you deal with that as a ministry leader, knowing that some people you may have potentially in the past worked with or collaborated with, have supported something that feels so misaligned with what we believe the word says.
Yeah, so for me, there's two parts of this, right? There's the practical reality and implication, and then there's a spiritual element. On the practical side, um, there is the reality that each of us um, has to deal with as a result of what is and what will come. But there's also a reality about who this country is that I think is illuminated in a glaring way as a result of this election. There was a lot of conversation and positioning and posturing about issues in the election, whether it was the economy, whether it was women's health care and health rights versus um, you know right to life. Uh, I maintain that this election was not about any of those issues. It was about a deeper reality. And to the extent that there are people that try to point to those issues, could it be that that is because they don't want to deal with the reality of what really was at issue in this election, which was a commander in chief whose skin is kissed by the sun and who wears a skirt?
Mm.
Mhm.
So that's a reality that I think nobody wants to address because then you got to deal with you if that's what it is that's really at issue. It's easy to place it in a costume and behind a mask of issues, which is I really think what it is when you start talking about who actually was elected and the record that we talked about a little earlier.
Yeah.
That's the practical side. On the spiritual side, I think that there is a challenge here for all of us who are true people of faith to consider what it is that's really most important to us and how serious we are about what we say that we believe. There is the issue of competence, which is a questionable proposition when we consider who was elected. But even beneath that, at a foundational level, there's a level of character. And I don't see either of those boxes being close to checked.
Mm.
And that's so as a spiritual matter, and as people who are committed to community, because our faith is lived out and expressed and grows in community. There is the question of how serious we want to be to our faith and our willingness to hold one another accountable, and the opportunity for us to coalesce and come together to now give witness to what the church is really about. And where the Black church is concerned, that's something that we've always done. So we're built for this, as I said on Sunday. And that's where the opportunity lives and lies, as far as our way forward.
We're built for this. So I believe that one thing that I've noticed is some pushback on people of faith who have been online or behind mics anywhere, really saying God is still God. We believe that God is still in control and that we don't need to panic, we don't need to have fear. But what I've also seen is a lot of people saying, well, yeah, but what about those of us who aren't there, who don't believe in God necessarily? And so I'm curious how we, as people of faith, can show up for our brothers and sisters who may not be as firm in that, and maybe a bit more, I guess, cynical, and not even them. Let me be transparent. This whole time, the voice in my head, and I don't know if it's because I'm from the Midwest and I know the country a little better than I think some people in this bubble of DC may, but I always had this cynical voice in my head, and I feel like I'm struggling with it because as a Christian, you think you're supposed to be hopeful and positive and I guess just a bit more uh the light in the room about what could happen. And so I guess long-winded version of how do we show up for people who are struggling, and how do we as believers deal with that when we have it, in our own minds.
Yeah. So I think two things can be true at the same time. We can believe God and trust in God and still have questions. We can be certain about some things and not so sure about others, at the same time. And so I think that when it comes to faith, in relationship with God, let me use those terms as opposed to the term faith. When it comes to relationship with God, I think it's important that we understand that God knows us better than we know ourselves. And so, is there joy? Yes. Is there hope? Yes. Is there faith? Yes. But are there questions? Yes. Are there frustrations? Yes. Can there be anger? Yes. And I think God has enough space within his arms to allow for all of that to be expressed and for us to still be loved and to be in relationship with God. So for me, this season in particular has been about lament, right? And when we look at scripture, we see a number of prophets who are angry with God and who express frustration with God and who are confused at what it is that they are seeing and experiencing. And that's really the whole story of God's people in a nutshell. It's cycles. We started out with God, we trusted God, then something moved as we got somewhere along the track. We started to question God. We moved away from God. Then we asked for forgiveness from God because our moving away from God had implications and consequences. We asked for God's forgiveness, and God was so gracious and loving and merciful that he gave us another chance. And then we went right back up to the top of the chart again. But guess what? Then something else happened, right? So I think the willingness to express and be completely transparent with God. I'm not talking about the prayers we pray in church that you want people to hear. I'm talking about the ones that are just between you and God, and where you are truly being transparent and you're letting God know how it is that you are feeling in a particular moment, in a particular season. And I think God is that's what draws us to God. That's what increases our faith and our connection and our closeness and our intimacy with God. So for those who are struggling with that, understand that God is a God who is able to accommodate our lament and our humanity that we feel in periods and times like this.
I think just like also to add on to that, it reminds me of when Job was going through everything that he was, and he was like, "Yo, like, what's going on? Why are you letting this happen to me? You know, I'm a righteous man. Do." And like everybody around him is telling him, "Curse God and die." Oh, you must have done something for this to happen to you. You know, and like I couldn't imagine being Job because it's like, yet and still, he still was steadfast in God and his belief in God. And even when he asked God, like, "Hey, why are you letting this happen?" God, like, I don't want to say sarcastically, but like with the little rah rah was like, "Where were you when I created the heavens and earth? Like, where, like, what were you doing? Oh, you weren't born? That's what I thought, you know?" So it's kind of just like having that humble checking by God. But like Pastor was saying, like being able to freely express, like, what you have me in right now makes no sense and it makes me feel uncomfortable. But regardless of what's going on around me, what the results may be, what may happen in 2, 3 years, I'm still going to trust that you have, you know, the plan in your hands. And we see the end of Job's story and how blessed he was as a result of it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in there.
We are eternal beings that become focused on approximate reality because of what it causes us to feel in a moment. But we're not earthly beings that have an occasional spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings that are having an earthly experience. So that's what our ancestors taught us when they were singing those songs, right? Because they were talking about
Mm-hmm.
a life and a world on the other side of this. That's what gave them the courage and the confidence and the power and the
Mhm.
perseverance to fight through what it is they had to fight through to get us to where we are right now. But guess what? It's our turn.
Mm. Whew. That's
That's real.
that's powerful, but it's also a little scary. Like our turn, like we supposed to be strong and built like they were. Because
Yes, sir.
I look
Right.
around, I don't know if I see it.
I don't know if I want to be it because that's
That's a different question, right? But just think about the things in life that are so important enough for you to be willing to sacrifice something, for you to be willing to go through something. Keith,
Mm,
you and I shared the experience of being girl dads, and there are a lot of things that I will tolerate, but you don't mess with my girls
mm,
because I'm going to the mat for that. And so I simply offer that as an example of what is it that is so important that you're willing to fight for, what is so significant that you will lay it on the line for.
yeah.
And until I think it was King that said this, until you find something that you're willing to die for, you have nothing to live for.
Mm, that's it. Yeah, you mess with them girls, I get real Second Amendment. Uh, but so I mean, I think it's been almost a week or a week, and I guess the as neatly as you could put it, like where do we go from here? What's next? We can't sit here and just cry for 4 years. We got to tighten up and do something.
Yeah. Well, I think in the first instance, we mourn and we grieve.
Hmm.
And
Make space for that. That's important.
it's critically important. And it's critically important that we create it in a framework or system that allows us to go to that space, as I suspect that we will have to over the coming days to go back to that space, that safe space. Um, I submit that community needs to be part of that, which is the reason why church is so critical now, perhaps more than ever before. But that's the first step. Then I think after we've mourned, after we've grieved, um, and as we go through the difficulties and the challenges, um, we decide that we're going to lean in and press forward and believe that God has something on the other side of this. The core, the foundation, the root of our faith is hope. If we don't have hope, we don't have anything else.
Mm,
And so I choose to lean in and to believe and to trust that God does God's best work in the middle of the dark.
mm,
Creation comes out of darkness. It comes out of nothingness. It comes out of chaos. And so that is my hope, and that's what I am looking to and looking for. Um, and I'm believing that God is up to something even in the middle of this. Why? Because God is God, and that's what God does.
That's good. That's good. What I heard there was make space for the mourned and the grieving and the kind of processing, but I also heard don't do it alone. You know, find your
Absolutely.
church family, find your support system, your personal advisory board.
That's right. That's right.
And
That's right. That's right.
make sure that you have that community. But then we mobilize, and we mobilize in a way that's confident, and that is rooted in understanding of who God is and who God has always been, and that this thing, as bad as it seems, it's not the end, and that God is still going to be God through it. And so I think that is a message we all need right now. Um, and I appreciate you for making time to share with our audience. Um, and thank you for joining us. Kaylin, you got anything to add?
Um, I don't think so. I think everything's been said, but we're gonna be all right, y'all. It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's that's one thing. Like honestly, after the first 24 hours or so, I did kind of feel that piece of like, okay, this is good. It may get worse before it gets better, but you know, we will be all right because God is still God, and we have one another, and we are a very resilient people. And the enemy doesn't really stand a chance when it comes down to it. But thank
We
you
built,
all for wait, we got something?
we built for this.
Yeah,
We built for
For
this.
sure. For sure. For sure.
that's a for sure right on. No, but thank you all for joining us, man. We hope that this has been helpful. As you kind of process what's happened, but also we hope that it gave you some hope and kind of maybe put that battery in your back in terms of what's going to happen moving forward. So thank you all for listening. All as always, reach out to us with questions, with comments. You can follow us at Savedish Pod. You can email us at savedish@gmail.com. And we look forward to talking to you guys next time.